write them could be projecting at one particular audience or could be projecting at a much larger audience. So the influence could vary for who they're trying to target, what they're trying to target, and why they're trying to target. Lyrics are not just something that's by happenstance that's thrown out there. Remember, we said it's like poetry, but it's different. Because the difference between poetry and lyrics is that lyrics is set to music. That's the only thing that makes it different. You know, you got poetry where they have these little congos in the back, you know, they're not setting the tempo. They're not directing the words. When something's written behind it that directs the words, that gives it tempo, that gives it, then that's when you have a song. And that song consists of lyrics. It's not a poem anymore. It's totally different. So looking at the influence, there is an influence that takes place when songs are written. The first influence is social. Meaning lyrics have an influence on society. In the late 80s, early 90s, there were some lyrical songs that began to come out, which we call hip-hop rap music. It began to have influence socially because it was talking about brutality or things that were happening to African American youth as far as what the police were doing to them to abuse or to supplicate or anything else like that. But they would write the songs to get that message out, to say no longer are you going to do this. No longer are we going to suffer through that. No longer are we going to be a part of that. Had social influence. During the civil rights movement, the same thing. Songs were written with social recourse. I always think about the song by Curtis Mayfield. Oh man, I thought about that song earlier. I can't remember what it is now. There was War by the group War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Had social implications because it was talking about during that time of the crisis that was going on in Iran, Iraq, during the crisis that was going on with North Korea, with China, with the Russians. Here comes this song, War, in the 60s and 70s. What is it good? They're saying stay out of it. The Vietnam War, the influences that were associated with that. So we saw those influences. Okay. She decided to have a conversation. But that's where the lyrics, the influence of those lyrics were in society. It was influencing society to say, stop the war. Stop the things that are going on as far as the fighting is concerned. Pull out of Vietnam. We just had the Korean War. Get out of the Korea. You know, leave those things alone. So those lyrics were written for that purpose. They had social implication. A lot of social implication turned into political implications. They had influence politically. Certain laws were passed. I Am Woman. Lyrics were written about women's rights. That song passed, the 19th Amendment came into effect because that song had such great influence on women's right to vote. It had not just social, but it also had political influence. So the theme of that song, the purpose of that song, had a greater influence than just a narrow, it had worldwide influence to where it changed our Constitution. And they added the 19th Amendment in order to give women the right to vote. Because of that song and several others that were associated with it. Had political influence on it. Same thing with the Civil Rights Movement. Songs of the Civil Rights Movement brought forth the 14th Amendment, which gave African Americans the right to vote, the right to be known as a person that belongs in this country, a person that had rights according to the First Amendment rights. And they were reinstituted in the 14th Amendment for African Americans. Then reinstituted again in the 19th Amendment for women, separately. The First Amendment rights were primarily for white Anglo-Saxon men. That's it. That's what it was written for. According to as of the founding father. But it took the 14th Amendment to get it transferred or instituted for African Americans, and then women were still left out. Then it took the 19th Amendment to get it brought forth for women, to give them a right to vote, equal opportunity, equal pay, which still doesn't exist today. But there were songs that were written on that behalf, working 9 to 5. That song was made for that purpose, to give women a right at saying, we work just like you do. We should get equal pay, just like you should. 9 to 5. Then they eventually made a movie out of it. But that was the same, that song had social and political influences. And that's what was brought forth for. So you're looking at lyrics again, and you're seeing now lyrics have power. Because you're saying something, but you're doing it through a song. Where sometimes if these people just wrote this down and put it on something, some of them are getting thrown into jail. Some people just writing these things down, writing these lyrics down, have suffered great consequences because they did so. Because there's power in lyrics. It's power in that word, that spoken word that's now being sung, being put to a song. That word has power, still has power. Economic. You also have economic influences. Songs have been written dealing with economic influences. Again, looking at society and saying, we want to write this song talking about money. There have been songs that have talked about taxation without representation. Ain't a bad thing. Do away with the IRS. Get rid of revenue. Songs, they're lyrics that have been written to that accord, that have talked about those things, that have said that these things are wrong, and have put economic pressure upon society to say this needs to be changed. There's been songs written about class war, the upper class and the lower class, that said we have a clash. There's something wrong with our society based upon economics. So they've had economic influences that have influenced our government to make certain decisions or to change certain things or to add certain laws or to take away certain laws based upon the economics. And these songs were songs of influence. The lyrics that were written for that purpose, to have that type of influence. Last but never least, spiritual. These lyrics can have